they don't need to be getting married. Like, you should not be talking to your future husband, future wife, whatever, like that. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Yangela Vaughn if you are new here, and if you are not new here, then welcome back to the clique. So I'm back to talk more about Love is Blind Season 7, and as I said in my first video, I'm just coming from the therapist perspective, and my first video was kind of like my first impressions of each couple, and I covered episodes 1 through 5. And for this video, I was going to do like episodes 6 through 9, but I ended up just finishing the whole season. So this is going to be more of like a wrap up final thoughts video about each couple. And again, I'm not going to necessarily go episode by episode. I'm going to cover couple by couple. So we can just jump right in, starting with Hannah and Nick. So when we left off, Hannah and Nick had the situation with the ducks, and he ran and rode on the ducks. And Hannah told him, if you do that, you're going to give me the ick. He went and did it anyway, and so it really upset her. And I think she also got jealous because he ended up riding the ducks with the older lady, and she did not appreciate that. So now they are kind of off. They're not on the best terms. And Nick ends up finding a list of 10 things that she wrote down that basically she didn't like about him, or things like she wasn't sure about him. And I can't help but feel like this was some passive aggressiveness on Hannah's part. She clearly left that list out on purpose. She wanted him to find it. She wanted them to talk about it, but she didn't want to just come out and say it. So instead, she just left the little nugget of the list for him to find. So essentially, this list is including things like, is he immature? Is he delusional? And she's just honestly questioning whether or not he is the guy for her. And this is a common theme throughout the rest of the episodes in this series. She is just honestly not feeling him that much. She constantly is bringing up his lack of maturity. She's asking him, what does he do at home? Does he have responsibilities at home? She gets into this whole conversation about how he lives with his parents. And even though she acts like she's okay with the fact that he lives at home with his parents, she's clearly not actually okay with it. It bothers her a lot. But again, she's passive aggressive. So she won't just come out and say, hey, I don't like that you live with your parents. Because I think a lot of it is that she's trying to protect the optics of the situation. And she doesn't want it to seem like she's judging him for that. But she literally is judging him for that. They get to the part where he brings her over so that she can like see how he lives. And obviously he's at his parents' house. So she's walking around the house and kind of like noticing different little religious things that they have in there. And she's kind of wondering, how is his family going to take it that she is not religious? So he's kind of trying to reassure her about that. They go upstairs and there is where he's living. His bedroom is up there, and she is just very much giving unimpressed. He shows her this closet, essentially where his pool table is, and she's like, you said you had a pool table. I didn't know it was gonna be in this little closet, like she's just kind of making him feel bad about what he has. Again, common theme throughout this series. There was this one scene where he comes home from work and she's cleaning. She's cleaning. And she's been cleaning like for a while, you can tell. And she's, I guess, a little bit agitated that he isn't pulling his weight, she feels, in that department. So she's like, are you gonna take out the trash? And he's like, okay, well, I just walked in the house, but sure. And he grabs the trash, takes it out. And instead of her just being like, thanks honey for taking out the trash, she is upset about it. She says, I don't want to have to tell you to take out the trash. Like, I'm glad that you take it out when I ask, but I want you to do it without me asking. And this just leads into another long conversation about finances and paying bills and how are they going to split the bills. And she's asking, like, does he invest in stocks? And he says, not really. I don't know a lot about it. I'm willing to learn. And she's just like, how do you not know about that? Like, I knew about that when I was 18. Like, she's just very hypercritical of him. And I could tell even like in these 7, 8, 9 episodes that he was going to get fed up with this at some point. Everybody has a breaking point, and she's just picking. And to be honest, I feel like a lot of this picking comes from a place of insecurity. I talked in the first video about how I feel like Hannah is very insecure, and she does tend to project that onto other people. And in this circumstance, it's Nick. She doesn't really feel like he's going to stick around. So I think she's kind of going out of her way to make it difficult for him to actually stay, aka self-sabotaging. There's a scene where her brother is coming over to visit. And so, she's trying to cook a nice little meal for her brother. And she's cooking and she asks Nick, hey, can you boil the pasta? And I guess he had said that he knows how to boil pasta, but then when she asked him to do it, he didn't really know how to do it. And honestly, I feel like he just didn't want to say that he didn't know how to do it because he knew she would probably put him down about it. So he just said, oh yeah, sure, I've done it like once. And he didn't know what he was doing. So she's just like, you don't know what you're doing. I'll just do it myself. Can't believe you can't even boil pasta. She's very hard on him. But the interesting thing about Hannah is that she can really dish out all these insults and she belittles people. But if anybody insults her, she is like very much upset about it. When they were sitting at the dinner with her brother, Nick was talking about like how he was having to do all this laundry, just kind of making small talk. And Hannah's like, yeah, you left all of the clothes on the bed for me to fold. And Nick is like, well, yeah, that's what you do when you're unemployed. And y'all, she did not like that at all. Like, she got really offended by the little joke he made, and it was a jab. Like, he jabbed her a little bit, but I think he was just like, hey, you pick at me all the time, so like this is one little time where I jabbed back, and now look how you're acting. And he even talks to her brother, like when she goes to the bathroom, Nick and the brother talk, and the brother was like, yeah, she's like that. Like, even he like agreed, like, yep, that's my sister. And I'm just thinking like, okay, if all of you people know that she's like this, why are none of you holding her accountable for that? She shouldn't be able to just talk to y'all any type of way or belittle people and nobody ever say anything, because that's leading her to believe that that is okay. And clearly it's not. You can see it's causing an issue between her and Nick. And it's even like this when they go to meet like her parents and her little brother. It was still kind of awkward. Like, she was still kind of like jabbing him throughout the interaction. The little brother was saying that he wanted to play football, and Nick was like, oh, what position do you want to play? Maybe kicker? And the little brother was like, kicker? No. And Hannah's like, my brother has quarterback energy, not kicker energy. Like, that was just like a low blow. Like, that wasn't necessary. But it's like she feels like she always has to like get her little dig in at any chance, even in front of her parents. And her parents are even trying to tell her, like, everybody's not going to be perfect all the time. Like, you have to have some grace. You have to allow people to make mistakes and allow people to be themselves and not nitpick every single thing that they do. And you can tell that her parents know that this is something that she does a lot and probably has done throughout her previous relationships, and it could be contributing to why she has had difficulty finding a person that she actually wants to be with. So I will give her parents some props for, telling her to stop nitpicking and to stop acting like everybody's going to be exactly how you want them to be all the time. So when Nick brings Hannah to meet his parents, she's like a whole different person. Like, she is very nice. She brings them gifts. And I was just kind of like, okay, where was this energy with Nick? Because she gave off the impression that, she was super kind, super sweet. And even though I do feel like Hannah has that side, that is not the side that she gives Nick majority of the time. By the time we get to episode 10, we're kind of still going through this same conversation. Like, they go on a date, rock climbing date, and she just kind of starts grilling him all over again. She's asking him, like, are you sure you're ready to get married in 2 weeks? Because I don't know if we're ready. I feel like you are still acting very immature a lot of the time. And Nick is starting to kind of, get that backbone. You can tell he's getting tired of her constantly nitpicking him. And he just tells her, like, you literally act like I am below you. Like, you belittle me all the time. And I feel like I should be treated like an equal. And this girl tells him, I'll start treating you like an equal when you start contributing like an equal. They don't need to be getting married. Like, you should not be talking to your future husband, future wife, whatever, like that. He is supposed to be your partner. He's supposed to be your equal. And for you to say, well, until you start contributing like that, I'm going to treat you like you're less than me, it's just a very, very bad sign. And I'm glad that Nick is starting to kind of recognize this and starting to kind of push against it. She's just telling him, like, you're 28. You should know how to do things. And it's frustrating for me that you don't know how to do stuff. And I honestly think that there's just a complete disconnect between, like, the way they were raised. She was raised and she, had to get out the house and be independent and all of that. Whereas he was a little more coddled. He was able to stay with his parents. He's still living with his parents. And by default, a lot of stuff that she had to learn how to do, he has not had to learn how to do them on his own yet. But the thing is, you knew that, Hannah, when you got with him. And this is a problem that I feel like is beyond just this show, Love is Blind. This is something that people, even in the real world, do all the time. They get in relationships with these people that they know have certain things that bother them, but because love is blind at times, they look past these things and they end up getting married. And because they never worked through the aspects of that person that really bothered them, now they are like, I'm ready to get a divorce. And it's things that you knew about that person before, but you just chose to ignore them, thinking that somehow you were going to be fine with it eventually. And that's literally what Hannah is doing with Nick. She needs to just let him go, but we'll get to that. So now they're getting ready to go to this costume party, and they're like wearing like flapper, 1920s attire, because that's the theme of the party, I suppose. Nick is trying to tell her, like, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Katie. And child, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I did not even remember who Katie was, but apparently Katie was like in the first couple episodes of the show, in the pods, and she and Nick had a very good connection. They were like each other's number one choices for a little while, but of course they ended up not picking each other. So he's telling Hannah, like, yeah, I'm excited to see her, I just want to get some closure. And Hannah's just like, well, I don't know why you need closure. I made my decision and I'm just moving forward, so I don't really get that, but whatever. They get to the little flapper party, and Hannah is like, oh, hey, Katie, come on, come meet Nick. You know, she's trying to like introduce them. It's very awkward. And Katie's kind of like telling Hannah like over on the side, like, oh, girl, Nick is cute. Like, he's kind of fine a little bit. And Hannah does not like it, but she's trying to like act like she's cool with it. Katie and Nick go over in the corner, and they're having like this long drawn out conversation. And throughout this conversation, you could just see Nick coming back into his confident self. It reminded me of when he was like in the pods. He was very confident. They were calling him like Rico Suave, like, you know, smooth talker. And we had not seen that in a while, mainly because with Hannah, he really isn't able to be that because he's always on the defense with her. Like, she's always putting him down. And so he's always in this kind of like small space. But as he's talking to Katie, he's able to be himself. He's able to be funny and happy and sweet. And they just have a very nice conversation. And I was just thinking, wow, like, what could have been? Like, if they could have chosen each other instead of him choosing Hannah, I think we would have gotten a whole different Nick on this show. But he chose Hannah. Now, Katie does say that one of the reasons why she didn't choose Nick is because she could tell that he was younger and he did have some maturing to do. But she says, you know, I could tell that you had a really good heart and I was interested in you. I just thought you needed to grow a little bit more, which I feel like is fair. Nick is a little bit on the immature side in certain ways. And Katie is a more mature woman. So I could see how, you know, maybe that could have been an issue even for her. But I do feel like Katie would have been a lot more patient with Nick compared to somebody like Hannah. So they get back home from the party and Hannah's mad. Hannah is like, you were over there talking to her for 40 minutes. What were y'all talking about? And Hannah is actually really mad because Katie kept saying, like, girl, your man kind of fine. And instead of Hannah just saying that, she's kind of beating around the bush about it. And he's like, okay, well, it sounds like you're mad about your best friend. So maybe that's who you should be upset with instead of me. I wasn't saying that she was attractive. She was saying that about me. And he's basically just like, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, I had a normal conversation with her. I talked about you. I talked about my feelings for you. And you can tell, like, Hannah is like, okay, well, at least now he's kind of standing up for himself a little bit. And I think she likes it. I think she likes that now he isn't just letting her walk all over him. He is standing up for himself and he's telling her, look, I'm not going to accept this from you because I know I didn't do nothing wrong. And she's like, oh, okay, well, we'll talk about it later. Let's go to bed. And it's like, yeah, see, when he actually bucks up to you a little bit, now you calm it on down. So I think a lot of it is just Hannah just tries to push his buttons to see how far she can push him. In the next scene with them, Hannah introduces Nick to her friends. And again, Hannah is just bashing him. Like, she's just throwing out all these little small things that he doesn't do. He doesn't walk my dog Luna when I want him to, unless I ask him. He doesn't take out the trash unless I ask him. And it's like her friends are just like validating everything that she's saying. He's trying to explain, like, okay, well, like, I'm trying, but you don't really give me a chance, but I am trying to do what you want me to do. But I mean, I feel like you're like wanting me to change who I am. And her friends are like, I don't think she's asking for that much. Yeah, I don't think she's trying to ask you to change who you are. She's just asking for little small things. Like, you should be able to do that. And this goes back to what I was saying about Hannah's brother. I think Hannah has a lot of people around her, family, friends included, that let her get away with way too much. And they don't hold her accountable. They don't hold her feet to the fire. And they make her feel like she's in the right in all these situations. instead of forcing her to actually see the part that she's playing in these situations. I'm not saying that Nick is perfect. Obviously, he needs to work on some things as well. But a lot of this is on Hannah and how she treats him. And there's just nobody in her life, besides maybe her parents a little bit, that are really like giving it to her straight. Even Nick isn't. Like, he's letting her get away with a lot of this stuff when he should not be letting her talk to him the way that she does. So in episode 11, the girls and the guys are like dress shopping, tuck shopping, all that. And interestingly enough, Hannah and Nick were not included in this scene. The next scene we see of them is them like at their apartment, and we find out that she chose not to go dress shopping. She says, I'm just tired of looking at things through rose-colored glasses, and I just don't really feel like we're gonna actually work out, so I didn't want to go through the whole dress shopping process. She brings up the list of 10 things again, and she's just like, there's still about 5 things on this list that I'm still not sure about. And it's like, girl, here we go again, like same story, like over and over again. And she's just berating him. You're delusional, you're immature, you're all these things. And I just felt really bad for Nick at this point, because you can tell like it's getting to him. Like, she has broken him in a sense. He was a very confident, seemingly man, and he just looks like a sad puppy now. That's like the best way that I could describe it. And I feel like she was just looking for a reason to leave. I think she wanted to push him to a point where he would be like, I'm fed up with this, I'm gonna just leave you, because she didn't want to be the bad guy in the situation, especially being on TV. She wanted him to break it off with her, but she wanted to break things off. And because he wouldn't break things off, she was forced to do it herself. And she eventually just tells him like, I don't think I can get married to you. There's too many things that we're not clicking on. And he seems like really sad about it. Like, I truly felt bad. And I felt like he should have broken it off with her, because honestly, that was a form of like emotional abuse, and I feel like that abuse would have continued on if she had not have broken it off. She would have just kept on at him over and over and over again. And people do stay in marriages like this, even though it's very, very unhealthy. So for Nick's sake, I'm glad that she broke it off. I wish he had broken it off a while before that, but at least they are not going to be in this toxic situation anymore. So the next couple that we'll talk about is Monica and Steven. So at first they were doing well, but things quickly ran off course. Monica is constantly talking about how, he talked about in the pods that he would get her flowers and all of that, and yet he has not done that yet. And she's frustrated about it. And this is kind of like where they have a difference in their love languages. Her love language is gift giving, and his is absolutely not. He says gift giving is like on the bottom of his list, and it comes a lot from his upbringing. He grew up in a household where they didn't have a lot of money, and so they couldn't really afford gifts a lot of the time. And she did not grow up that way. So automatically they are having this clash on just things that they value in relationships or from people in general. Throughout their conversations, you can just tell that there's a lot of apprehension from Steven. He's just constantly like talking about how it's just such a big decision and it's really weighing on him. And Monica is starting to feel like, okay, like, are you not trying to marry me? Like, what's going on here? And he's trying to like, oh, no, like, I want to marry you. I'm just, saying it's a big decision. He's trying to reassure her about it. But I could tell that he is not sure at all. They have this scene where all the couples meet up, and there's like these fireworks going off outside, And so a lot of the couples go out there to watch the fireworks. But Steven was inside talking to Garrett, I believe. And so Monica's like, come on, let's go outside, let's watch the fireworks. And Steven never makes it out there because he was in this deep conversation with Garrett. Monica comes back in and she's like, oh, it was so romantic out there. Thanks for the romance. Thanks for enjoying that with me, being very passive aggressive. And they have this whole big conversation about it. She's very upset with him because he didn't come and join her, and he just was like, I didn't really know it was that big of a deal, like, sorry. And so as the time goes on, she's still just bringing up like he's not romantic enough, he doesn't buy her flowers enough, and honestly all he talks about is like sexual stuff all the time. Like, that's all he talks about. That's clearly a priority on his list versus romance is a priority on her list. He eventually takes her to this like pressed flowers place for a date because he's like, she brings up getting her flowers a lot, and I couldn't just get her flowers at this point. I had to do something a little bit bigger. So he took her to make these little pressed flower picture things, and it was a very cute date. It was a cute date idea. I might steal that. But overall, as the episodes go on, they are just growing more and more apart instead of closer. Steven apparently lost his job, which we found out in the later episodes. And so Monica has kind of been carrying him for a little while. And she's just talking about how he just still feels very unsure about them and about the wedding. And it's making her not want to be intimate with him. And this is something that is difficult for him to manage because that is all he ever talks about is like sexual intimacy and all that. So they are definitely disconnected. They are not on the same page at all. And then randomly we get this scene where Taylor is in the apartment with Monica and like they're crying, and Taylor's saying, you didn't deserve that. Can't believe he did that to you. And I'm just like, okay, like, camera people, where were you when this actually started? Because clearly we're starting like in the middle of something. And this happens repeatedly on this show, which is something that is very annoying for me. But anyways, Taylor's like, you don't deserve this. Can't believe he did this. And then all of a sudden Steven like walks in from the kitchen, which was so awkward. Like, they're having this whole conversation about him and he can hear it. He's right there. But anyways, Monica and Steven start talking, and apparently Steven had a sleep study, but he was like texting some girl that he met during the sleep study, and he says he was drunk. And he was like sending her all this like stuff about his fetishes and all this like weird stuff. And I'm like, first of all, who gets drunk at a sleep study? Like, that was weird. But anyways, Monica gets very upset with him. She's like, I don't want to be with you anymore. And Steven doesn't even fight it. He just gets up and he's like, yep, I know I messed up. I know how this goes. And he just gets up and walks out. Like, he clearly just wasn't that interested. I don't think he was even that interested in this show for real. Even he said I should not have come on this show. And I mean, at least he acknowledged it, but it was very unfair to Monica because she really wanted to get the full experience. She wanted to find a husband, and I feel like Steven was on there probably just to be on TV. Or maybe just to meet women, I really don't know. But he clearly was not serious about her or this process. Okay, so 2 couples already off the show, not making it to the weddings. And we might as well just continue on with another couple that doesn't make it to the wedding. We'll talk about Tim and Alex next. So they start off pretty much rocky right out the gate. As soon as they got to Mexico, they were already kind of getting a little aggravated with each other, a little snippy, especially on her end. He kept saying the I got that dog in me thing, and Alex hated it, but Tim just kept saying it anyway. So that was already an issue. And then we have another scene where the camera people were asleep, I guess, and they missed the whole argument. So we're coming in and we can tell that argument happened, but we didn't get to see any of it. Tim shows up at the door and Alex lets him in, and they're talking about the fight that they had last night. And they're kind of just like recapping what happened, which it would be so great if we just had footage of this. But from what we could gather, they got into an argument. Alex was like moody. She says she just was like missing home. And this led to him trying to figure out what was wrong with her. And he's like, is it me? Is it something I did? And she keeps trying to tell him like, it's not you. It has nothing to do with you. And this leads to her saying that he's like insecure. And that's why he thinks it's something to do with him when it has nothing to do with him. And I guess she calls him out of his name. We don't know exactly what she called him, but he does mention like, that's a hard line for me. Nobody's gonna call me out of my name. He's talking about how when they were arguing, she kept cutting him off and not letting him speak. And she even acknowledges like, yeah, it was wrong of me to put my hand over your mouth while you were talking. I'm like, girl, yeah, I'm glad you know that was wrong. That was very inappropriate, especially for a person that you just started dating or talking to. I wouldn't even do that to my husband probably. So yeah, that wasn't good. It was very interesting how Alex was trying to talk to Tim about this argument, and Tim was almost like not even there. Like he was already like over it. He was like zoning out into the distance, and he's just like, no, I can't accept that. Like, I'm not gonna let you treat me like that. And you could tell that there's some type of trauma or something from his past that Alex really, really triggers. And he constantly talks about how he doesn't want to argue. He doesn't like to argue. He'll just walk away instead of arguing. Versus Alex is confrontational. Like, she is not afraid to argue. So by default, the two of them butt heads. Because I think, he was trying to de-escalate, and she wasn't really trying to hear all that. Like, she's like, no, like, you done got me riled up now, so now we're about to have an argument. And even though she does apologize to him and she tries to like hug him and like make up, you could just tell he was not in it. It looked like he was done with her at that moment. And I could pretty much tell like they probably weren't going to make it just from that one interaction. It was obvious that he did not feel like she was the one. But later on, he does forgive her. He says, she showed him that she was willing to learn and willing to work on some things. And so he doesn't leave. But he was thinking about it. But he stayed. So now Alex brings Tim to meet her family. And she's like debriefing him beforehand. And she's like, listen, my dad is the only one that doesn't even know that I'm on this show. He doesn't know the premise of this show. So you're going to have to just ask him for his blessing to marry me. And she's like going down like item by item, exactly how he has to ask and what he has to say. And I'm just like, girl, relax. Like, let him handle it. Like, you don't need to micromanage every single thing that he's doing. But I digress. Tim ends up making a really good first impression with her family. Her family really likes him. They talk a little bit about their first little argument that they had, but they say they're going to move forward and they've learned a lot about each other. And so they think they're going to be okay. Tim ends up pulling her dad aside and he reads the letter that he actually read to Alex while they were in the pods, the letter that he wrote for her dad. So he reads it out loud. Her dad starts crying. It was a very sweet, sentimental moment. And he gives the blessing for them to get married. So at this point, we're doing okay. At this point. As the season goes on, they go and see each other's houses. And to be honest, y'all, it's like night and day. Tim is very organized. He has all of his stuff in specific places, and Alex's house is kind of a mess. She has clothes everywhere, and I thought this was kind of crazy. Like, I have a lot of clothes too, and my clothes end up on my bed. I'm not gonna lie. But if I knew that I was going on this TV show and eventually the cameras and my fiance were going to come and see my house, I would have hung my clothes up or something. And she just didn't care. Like, all her stuff was all over the place. It was a lot. And even still, he didn't say too much about it. Like, I think he was willing to accept her messiness, even though it was the complete opposite of how he is. Episode 10, Tim takes Alex to meet his parents, and they're a really cute couple. They're talking about things that they learned in their marriage. They've been married for a very long time, so they're just offering their advice. And I couldn't help but notice, again, y'all, I'm not a body language expert, but I could not help but notice the contrast between Tim's parents and Tim and Alex. Tim's parents are sitting on the couch and they're like leaned into each other. They're like have their hand or arm on each other, just touching each other affectionately. And then Tim and Alex are literally like leaned away from each other. You don't see them touch. You don't see them look at each other as they're talking. They're not smiling at each other. It just looked like they had no chemistry there, or like they weren't even dating. And I just felt like that was a really bad sign. Fast forward a little bit later, and everything has gone left. Alex is like over in the kitchen trying to get her food together, and she's about to sit down at the dining room table, and he's like, actually, bring that over here. We need to have a conversation. And I'm like, oh, this isn't gonna be good. And then he brings up the fact that, hey, like, my parents came all the way here. They drove like 10 hours, I think he said, to meet you. And as soon as the cameras went down, you went to sleep. And that was like very offensive to him. And she's kind of like, I mean, we were talking for hours. I was tired, so I went to sleep. And you could tell, like, Tim has just been keeping a list of things that have been bothering him, and he's been letting them bottle up, which you should not do. When you're having an issue with somebody, especially if you're in a relationship with them, you need to bring up those issues as they're coming versus waiting until you have a list of things and trying to dump them all on that person at once. That's never going to go well. So Tim is bringing that up. He's bringing up how, you know, when I met your family, I grilled all by myself. And even after that, I came in and I cleaned all the dishes. You didn't even offer to clean the dishes. If you had cooked for me, I definitely would have cleaned the dishes. You wouldn't have even had to ask me to do that. And she's like, I mean, hey, if you would have told me, like, I would have done it. I didn't know you felt like that. And he's like, well, I shouldn't have to tell you. That's another problem. You cannot just assume that a person knows what you're feeling and what you're thinking. If you want something, or if you need something, if you feel a way, you have to communicate with the person. And this whole idea of, well, if they're my person, they'll just know, that's unhealthy. You should not hold anybody to that type of standard. Yes, there will be some things that your partner will know without you telling them. But the vast majority of things, they're not going to know unless you talk to them about it. And that is a part of having healthy communication with your partner. And that's just something that a lot of couples don't do well with. And Alex and Tim are a perfect example of this. He starts bringing up how she was like dry texting him. And at one point she like didn't text back at all. And I guess this really upset him. And after this long conversation, he's just like, you're just not the one for me. And frankly, I don't ever want to see you again. And he just like gets up and walks out. Like, it was very abrupt. And I don't know if they cut stuff out or what, but it seemed like it was just very 0 to 100. But whatever, another couple down from our 6. Now we're down to just 3 left. Okay, so the next couple we're going to talk about is Taylor and Garrett. I'm going to be honest with y'all. There's not a lot that we can talk about with them. They have a pretty good situation going on. They get along very well. They have a lot in common. There's really only 2 real hiccups that happen throughout the season. And the first one is that she wants to live in San Diego. She's from San Diego, and she says that she always wanted to raise her family there. Garrett's family is from around the DC, Virginia area, and he is just like, he doesn't really mind San Diego, but he's like, that's really far from my family. I don't really know how they're going to feel about being that far from us, and I don't really want to be that couple that only sees their family for holidays. But Taylor isn't really budging on this. Like, she's pretty adamant that she wants to raise her family in San Diego, and I believe that's like where her family is from and where they are. So that's kind of a thing. He mentions later on that his parents were kind of emailing him, and they were a little bit concerned about this whole situation. And I don't know if it's just a San Diego thing or if it's just this whole process was a lot for them to handle. It is kind of like a repeating theme, is that his family is concerned. But Garrett continually says, even if they don't show up to the wedding or even if they don't support this, I'm still going to do what I want. And if that's marrying you, I'm going to marry you regardless of what they say. So fast forward to that 1920s costume party that we talked about earlier. They are like getting ready to walk into the party, and again, missed footage, but apparently there was a situation where Garrett received a text from his ex, and Taylor is very much not okay with it. She's like, you shouldn't be talking to your exes. I've been cheated on in the past. I don't play that. And Garrett's like, oh, well, all I did was just like the message. That's all I did. And she kind of forgives him. They're about to walk to the party, so I think she's just trying to like, let's just talk about it later. But then they're in the party talking to the other couples, and Garrett lets it slip that, yeah, I just, I sent her a text back saying like that I'm happy with Taylor and all this. And she's like, wait. What do you mean you replied? You told me all you did was like it. And the couple they were talking to, I think it was like Ashley and Tyler, they're like, oh, we're going to just let y'all talk. So they get up and walk away. And Taylor and Garrett literally spend the rest of this costume party talking about this. Garrett's like, oh, well, I thought that was just like a detail. I didn't know you wanted all the details. That's why I just said, I just liked it. And she's like, that's not just a detail. Like, that's a whole fact that you purposely left out. Like, you are not being honest with me. What else are you not being honest about? You're supposed to be meeting my parents soon, and now I'm not even sure about that, because her whole thing was that she did not want him to meet her family unless she was like 100% about him. And before she saw those texts, she was 100% about him, and now she's like wavering a little bit. But I guess they had another off-camera conversation after the party that night, and they were able to make up, because by that next morning, she's like, okay, we're good. We're about to go meet my family. And they just weren't mad at each other anymore. She was over it. So he meets her family. All we saw was like some phone camera footage. We didn't get to see the full interaction on camera, but it seems like it went fine. They show like a little small conversation where she's introducing him to her mom. But again, it's very short. I don't think her family really wanted to be on camera that much. So I think they had to just kind of like work with what they could get. So fast forward to the finale. They're one of the couples that makes it to the wedding day. And everything goes well. They both end up getting married. I could tell that his family especially was a little apprehensive. They kept saying like, this is just so not like you. Like, you're not very spontaneous normally. And so we're just shocked that you even came on this show and that you're going through with this. But, you know, we're happy for you. So that was like the only kind of interesting thing from the whole wedding scene with them, to be honest. It was pretty obvious that they were going to both say yes. There wasn't a lot of suspense there. They had been doing well practically the entire show, except those couple little hiccups that they were able to get past. So happily ever after right now for Taylor and Garrett. Oh, one thing that I did think was really cute. Taylor's parents got married on the 13th of whatever month. His parents also got married on the 13th, and the two of them are getting married on the 13th. And it's cute because they like all brought it up and they talked about it. I thought that was like chef's kiss. So moving on to a couple that had a little bit more issues, Marissa and Ramses. So we start off on episode 7. They are going on a boat date, and you could tell she's like excited to be on the boat. She's talking about how when she was in the military, she was on boats a lot, and you could just kind of tell like he's uncomfortable with the conversation. And I could tell right off the bat, like, this whole military thing is going to be an issue for them. I mentioned it in the first video, and I'll mention it again in this one. They are not on the same page about the military. And so this continues throughout the series. They have a scene where Ramses cooks for Marissa and they're sitting down eating. And they kind of start off talking about like religion, and he's asking her, what are we thinking about for like the officiant? Do we want it to be like a religious officiant? Do we want religious themes in the wedding? Because I'm not very religious. And she's like, you know, I'm not very religious either. Like, I'm good with like spiritual. And so they kind of both agree on that. And then he kind of segues into talking about the military, which was, I feel like that was what he wanted to talk about the whole time. But he had to kind of figure out a way to get to it. And so he's kind of like asking her how she feels about the military. She's telling him that, you know, she still supports the military. She supports the troops. And he does not like this. He is like, he thinks it's very unethical what the U.S. does to all these other countries. He would never join the military. And if she ever went back to the military, that would be like a hard line for him. Essentially, he's like, I would divorce you if you went back to the military. And it was just like a very awkward and tense conversation. But to be honest, y'all, I'm not surprised that they're having these issues, because in the pods, they did not talk about anything very deep. A lot of their conversations were actually quite shallow, and they both made it seem like they were super easygoing and they had so much in common, when in reality, Marissa probably had more in common with Bowden, the one that she did not choose, because he is from the military and they had that in common, versus Ramses, never been in the military and is actively against the military. So that's like a whole side of her that he does not appreciate, and he does not like that she used to be in the military. She eventually introduces Ramses to her friends, and a lot of her friends are either in the military or they're married to people in the military. They are very much part of that world. And once they find out that he doesn't like the military, they were like turned off. You could tell. They were like, wait a minute. We support the troops around here. So are you saying that you don't support the troops? Are you saying that you want to support her if she went back? And he's basically like standing his ground, like, no, I don't feel like it's morally a good thing to be in the military or to join the military. And even though like I understood what he was saying, I don't know how he didn't think that this would be offensive, not only to her friends, but to his fiance. Because essentially, you're like questioning her judgment or questioning her character. And that's never going to go over well with anybody. So the next major scene is Marissa bringing Ramses to meet her family. And it's like her mom and her siblings. Right off the bat, mom is like not feeling him. She says she doesn't know about his 80s style. She doesn't like his jerry curl. Like, she was very blunt, borderline rude, but it was a kind of awkward conversation. The whole dinner was pretty awkward. Her mom gives them this photo album of like all these pictures that she's compiled. It was really sweet. She talks about how they grew up without having a lot of money and they oftentimes couldn't afford photo albums. So she wanted to make this for her daughter. And this kind of segues her into asking about Ramses and his money. And she's asking him like, okay, so what do you do for a living? And she's like, I need to know that because I don't want my daughter having to work while she's raising your kids. So I need to make sure that you're going to be able to take care of her so she could be a stay-at-home mom because that's what she wants. And Marissa is not really saying a whole lot, but mom is very adamant about this. Her mom asks if he has a college degree, and he says, you know, I was in college, but I dropped out. I had a lot going on, especially when my dad died. And her mom just does not look very happy. I think she was really hoping that he did have a degree and he had a solid career path. And Ramses, you know, doesn't really have that. He says, you know, I've always had a job. I've always kept a job, but I don't have a solid career as of right now. He also brings up how he was married before. He got married when he was 25 to his high school sweetheart. Mom definitely doesn't like this. And I'll give it to Ramses. You know, mom is giving him a lot of like negative energy. And he still just keeps going. He's still being very open, being very vulnerable. And he handles himself very well throughout this conversation. So I will give him a lot of props for that. I'm not sure if I would have handled it quite as well as he was. So Marissa goes to the bathroom at some point and her mom just starts going in on Ramses. She's like, listen, I'm not going to have you messing up my daughter's situation. My daughter's going to law school. You're not about to get all her money. She's going to have a prenup. She tells him that she doesn't even believe in marriage because she's like, marriage is not forever. It's temporary. You come in, you learn your lessons, and then you move on. And she says that her daughter has been hurt by her father. She's been hurt by her exes. And she doesn't want that to happen again with Ramses. So Marissa comes back after all this. And mom is like, yeah, so you're going to get that prenup, right, Marissa? And Marissa's like, we'll talk about it later. You know, we haven't decided on that yet. And her mom is like, no, I need to hear you say that y'all are going to have a prenup. And it was just, I don't know, y'all. It was very tense, a little bit cringy to watch. But I think her mom just cares. I think her mom has been through a lot of difficult situations and probably a bad divorce. And this has left her kind of jaded. And she wants to try to protect her daughter as much as possible. And that is something that I think anybody could relate to, even if maybe you wouldn't come at Ramses the way that she did. You can understand her being very protective over her daughter. And like I said, Ramses took it on the chin. He handled it like a champ. And so overall, it was an awkward but fine conversation, I suppose. And it was funny because after all of that happened, they were back at the apartment and Marissa's like, I'm sorry about my mom. Like, she definitely needs therapy. And I'm like, yeah, she does. You probably need it too, but your mom definitely does. So during this conversation, they also bring up having kids. And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking maybe like 4 or 5 years. And she's like, maybe a little bit sooner. I'm already like 32, so I don't want to be like 36, 37 by the time I have kids. And he's like, I'm thinking probably 4 or 5 years. So they're not on the same page about this. They're also not on the same page about contraception. He wants her to be on birth control. She's like, absolutely not. We can just have a baby for all I care. And he's like, well, no. But he doesn't want to use protection himself, but he wants her to be on birth control. And this was something that I felt like was a red flag, because Ramses, in a lot of ways, he seems very liberal. He seems very much, oh, I'm not the typical masculine man. I don't support patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. But yet, when it comes down to this, he's not very progressive. He's actually very traditional in his thinking. And honestly, this just made me feel like, what else are you not very progressive about? Because I don't want to say that he was faking a little bit in the pods, but it just seems like the more and more they're talking, the more I'm just like, he isn't exactly how he portrayed himself in the pods. In some ways, yes, he's very progressive, but in a lot of ways, he's just not. And that's showing more and more as they keep talking. So by the time we get to episode 10, things are really derailing. They are in the kitchen talking about intimacy or lack thereof. She talks about how she's sick a lot. She has some type of sickness that causes her to not have a lot of energy. And sometimes she just doesn't feel like doing anything. And he's like, this is a problem for him. He's like, I just want to make sure that our physical connection is good. I want to make sure that this is not how it's going to be when we get married, because I don't know if I'll be able to deal with that. And she's just like, what are you saying? Like, are you saying you're going to cheat on me? You're going to leave me? Like, what's really going on? And he's not really reassuring her that much. He's just kind of making it clear, like, that is very important to me. That intimacy is essential. We have to have that physical connection. And I'm just kind of like, this is just not a good sign. It's just not looking good for me. Even though, yes, physical connection is important, that should not be the end all be all in your marriage or in your relationship. And the fact that he's just so preoccupied with it makes me concerned. And I think it's something that she really needs to pay attention to. So now we are in episode 11, and they are like filling out their marriage certificate. And he's like asking her what her birthday is, which I thought was a little awkward. And I would give this like a slight red flag, like a yellow flag. Because why don't you know her birthday and y'all about to get married? Like, be so for real. But anyway, they fill out their marriage license. And later on, they have a scene where they're on a boat again. And they're kind of talking about the wedding. And she wants him to bring her mom flowers, probably because their first interaction wasn't all that great. And he's just kind of like, I mean, why do I have to do that? He's not really too interested in it. And this kind of leads her into just saying, like, in general, he doesn't really seem like he's very interested in the wedding planning and the details of the wedding. And she's like, I feel like it's all on me, and I don't like that. Like, I want you to be a part of it. And he's basically just like, I mean, it's just not that important to me. Like, I think we need to focus more on me and you and making sure that we're good. So they're just not on the same page at all when it comes to this. And then by the end of episode 11, we're jumping again into the middle of a conversation. And we don't really know exactly what happened, but Marissa is like in tears. So you can tell they've been having like a conversation that is not a very good one. And essentially he's saying things like, I don't doubt that I love you, but it takes more than just love to actually get married to somebody. And I was just like, oh no. He's trying to find a way to get out of this. He is basically breaking up with her, and it's a process that spans from the end of episode 11 and it continues throughout episode 12, and it ends up with him saying that he just doesn't think that he can do it. And y'all, my heart was like breaking for Marissa, because you can tell that she had a visceral reaction to what he was telling her. She is crying. She is on the floor. I mean, it was a very, very sad and intense scene. She just keeps saying, we were good 2 days ago. Like, how could you be so sure 2 days ago and then now today you're not sure? And to be honest, I feel like it's because he wasn't sure the entire time, but he just wasn't bold enough to tell her. And this is just another couple that honestly should have broken up a long time ago, but he wanted to drag it out to see if they could maybe get to a point where he was ready to get married. And honestly, I don't think he should have been even on this show. He clearly still has a lot of trauma from his first divorce that he went through, and he wasn't ready for a show like this. He keeps saying that he needs more time. He wants to make sure before he jumps into a relationship or jumps into a marriage. And it's like, okay, but why did you come on this show? You knew y'all only had a very limited time to get to know each other and get married. So if you knew you were the type of person that would need more time, which is normal, by the way, you just should not have come on this show. This show was not right for you. And I do feel like he dragged Marissa into this, and now he's broken her heart. She's on the phone with her mom, and she's just like, Mom, what do I do? Like, I've never felt pain like this before. And I feel like anybody that has been through heartbreak or been through a bad breakup could really relate to what she was going through in this scene. And it was raw. I mean, it was tough to watch, but I think that it was probably for the best. I don't think they were as compatible as they thought they were. And honestly, I think if they had made it to the wedding day, he probably would have told her no at the altar. She would have said yes. And that, I think, would have been way worse. So at least he broke it off before they got all the way to the altar. That's all I can really give him. Okay, so we finally made it to our final couple, and that is Ashley and Tyler. So these two honestly were going great. They really, similar to Taylor and Garrett, there's not a whole lot to talk about them for the majority of the series. I remember in the first video that I made, I talked about how Tyler just seemed to know everything to say. Like, he knew all the right things to say. And it felt like he was kind of overcompensating a little bit, not gonna lie. And I was like, why is he just like trying to be so perfect? Like, come off as such the perfect guy. And I'm like, there has to be a catch, right? Like, he can't be as great as he's portraying himself to be. And unfortunately, y'all, we found out that he was not being very upfront and honest with her. They're like 2 weeks out from the wedding, and he tells her that he has 3 sperm babies. He literally calls them sperm babies. He says he donated his sperm to a lesbian couple, like a friend of his and her wife. He donated his sperm, and Ashley, you know, like, she takes it pretty well. It's very hard for her. You can tell she's not happy about it. She's not happy that he kept it from her, but she's asking him, like, okay, well, do you know the kids? Are you in their lives? Do you know what they look like? And he tells her, no, like, they were just sperm babies. I don't know them at all. Like, I just donated my sperm, that's it. And we find out in real time that this is a lie. He does know the kids. There are plenty of pictures all over the internet and on TikTok of him with the kids for holidays and all these other times. So he just basically lied to her. He lied the first time through omission by not even telling her about the 3 kids. And then even after he tells her about them, he's still not being honest. So I'm like, at this point, I'm like hoping that Ashley tells him no at the wedding, because I'm just like, any guy that will lie to you about something as big as children, that's a huge red flag. Even the first situation with him just lying about having the sperm babies was a big enough lie or big enough omission for me to have some serious side eyes and questioning whether or not I want to marry this man. But on top of that, he lied about that too. And he does know the kids. And the baby mom has come out and like spilled all the tea about it. And so I'm hoping that Ashley does not actually go through with this wedding. But y'all, fast forward. Finale, they do get married. She basically says that, you know, she forgives him and that she's moved on from it. She's not going to hold it against him. He's very like emotional coming up to the wedding. And I think he feels guilty. I can't jump into his mind and tell y'all exactly what he's thinking, but I could tell that he was feeling very weighty during the whole pre-wedding part of the episode. And I was just like cringing, because Ashley even says at one point, something catastrophic would have to come out for me to tell him no at the altar at this point. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, she has no idea what she's going to come out to after this show airs. And she didn't know. That's all I can say, y'all. She didn't know the full story. So she says yes to him at the altar. He, of course, says yes. They get married, have the reception, all that. Happily ever after. And it just was kind of like anticlimactic, because we all know that he's not being honest with her. So by default, we're thinking like this marriage was not built on a solid, truthful foundation. So that's never a good thing. It's always bad to start a relationship off on the wrong foot, as people say, or a relationship based off of essentially lies. So we're going to see what happens on the reunion. I may or may not come back and do a video talking about what happens on the reunion, depending on what happens. If it's enough drama or enough that I can pull out of it for a full video, then I might come back to you guys for a reunion video. But for now, this video has been long enough. If you stuck it out this long, I really appreciate it. I hope you give this video a thumbs up, because that really helps to spread my videos throughout the YouTube algorithm. And make sure you check out my other videos where I'm reacting to other TV shows. And also subscribe to my channel if you have not already. I would love for you to be a part of my YouTube family. And thank y'all just so much for watching, especially this long video. I really, really appreciate it. And I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.